And this morning we're looking at the gifts of God, a gift of power. And wow, I think that's right in line with what we're dealing with. We're dealing with God's power. At least I'm thinking about it. You know, we talk about America, strongest and most powerful nation on the earth, but it's so minimal compared to the power of God and His cosmic power. And then in a minute way, God deals with us individually and shows His power to us in His life in individual ways. As prayers are being answered, He is demonstrating He is a powerful God. It's a great verse I'd like to look at is Ephesians 3:20. In a variety of translations it says, "Now to Him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to His power that is at work within us." Isn't that a great verse? Greater than we can ask or imagine. This is what God is up to on our behalf. "Now to Him who is able to do far more abundantly than all we ask or think, according to the power at work within us." Now to Him who by His power within us is able to do far more than we ever dare to ask or imagine. Now all glory to God, who is able through His mighty power at work within us to accomplish infinitely more than we might ask or think. Isn't that great? There's a book written, must be 40, 50 years ago now, called Your God is Too Small. It's by J.B. Phillips. But I think our God is too small, isn't it? How many of us would say, yeah, our God is too small? I think if John the Baptist was here, he would say, there's two things I'd like to say. I'm too big and God's too small. You know, that's the way it's working in my life, because he said these words: He must increase, but I must decrease. He must become greater and greater, and I must become less and less. This is the assigned moment for Him to move into the center. When I slip off to the sidelines, those are a great way of looking at what our relationship with God needs to be in order to access His power. How many of you have said, I need this like a hole in the head. I need this problem, you know. Or why me? Or that's just my luck. A lot of times we say those kind of things, and I think what God is saying to us, don't you realize this is just an opportunity to demonstrate my power? I want to show my power in your life. I was thinking of that time when Jesus did not immediately go to help Lazarus when he heard that he had fallen sick, and then he's dead, and he wakes a couple more days, and finally he arrives and he says, you know, it's just to show my power, to show God's glory in all of this. I have it all under control. How many of you think you have it more under control than God does? I've got it. You know, if you'd only work it my way, it'd be all under control. But the truth of the matter is, those things in our life are opportunities for God to demonstrate His power. 1 Corinthians 12, Paul said this: "Therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, and the Lord did not see fit to do that." You know, there's been a lot of speculation as to what that thorn in the flesh is, as far as was for Paul. You know, some people say, you know, Paul talked about writing in his big handwriting or signing things at the end. And some people think that, well, maybe he had some kind of vision problem. And other people said, you know, people in his station of life probably were married. Maybe Paul had a bad marriage going, because he never mentions his wife. I don't know what his thorn. How many of you think I shouldn't ask this question. This is how many of you had a thorn in the flesh? This is for sure there was. I think maybe the fact that he didn't mention what that thorn in the flesh is helps us to say that's maybe something like I'm dealing with. Each one of us has a thorn in the flesh, do we not, right now? There's somebody, or there's something, or there's some event, or there's something going on that we say, gosh, this is a thorn in my flesh, and I've prayed about it. And where's God? He's prayed about it and prayed about it and prayed about it. What is he up to? I think Paul shares with us what God is up to at all times. And he says this, God said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in your weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I'm weak, then I am strong. Not because I'm strong, but because Christ is strong in me. How many of you say, gosh, you can hang on to that verse like that, and it just gives you some real hope for what you're dealing with right now? That, I'm convinced I'm weak. I'm convinced there's a thorn in the flesh. But can God use that? Can God take that and turn it around, turn it on its head? Help me discover something special. Jesus was all about making the last first. And in order to become great, you have to be least. And in order to be wealthy, you need to give up all your possessions. He's always turning things on his head, because I think he was wanting us to realize that even when there's a thorn, that's an opportunity for him to show his power. And each of us has a thorn. Each of us has a thorn. I wish you could say, I really got it all together. I snapped at Ann this morning. Here's my best friend trying to comfort me. And she says, I'm hurting too. I've got a thorn that comes out. And I said, close to my hurt, there's a lot of anger too. And a lot of times there's kind of mixed things going on inside of us at all times. We're complex people, aren't we? And we're not easy to understand. And maybe God realizes that right next to our heart, there's not just a simple answer. And he can use those things that are difficult in our life to turn things around and to enable us to see that he's really at work, doing something powerfully good on our behalf. How many of you love Psalm 23? Wouldn't be surprised if this doesn't come out on Friday at this funeral. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Now, there's some people that separate those two and say rod means one thing. Rod, by the way, we use that term sort of as spare the rod, I guess, and spare the child, and we spoil the rod. I guess something like that. This is spare that rod, and also back in my day, I don't know if they still use this term, but the gangsters used to call a rod their what? Yeah, their gun was a rod, and it was kind of it was a sign of authority. There's something powerful. So rod, it was a stick that could be used to whop things with it, and the staff, some people say, is more the element of a stick, basically used to guide. But you look at a lot of translations these days, and most commentators would say, basically they're interchangeable. It was a stick, just a plain stick. And but what we use or call just plain sticks, God can invest and say, there's a sign of my authority. It's a sign of my power. And that's exactly what happened. I think as far as David was concerned, this man who's going to be king says, I still think of that time when I was a shepherd and holding a stick in my hand, and God showed his power and authority, as well as his comfort and guidance with that stick. He gave me the stick, and it was very precious to me. It was my rod, my staff. Back in the days of Moses, many years before David, Moses grew up with a silver spoon. He had it all, and then he falls from this coveted position, being the top of the ladder, and then he ends up in the backside of the desert. He's a place where most people don't want to go, but he's kind of gotten comfortable. He's become a shepherd, and as a shepherd, he's thinking life, is working for him. He's got a family. He's safe and secure, and God has other plans for Moses. God wants to speak to him, and he's heard the prayers of other people, and Moses is now called upon for a ministry. He's supposed to be a part of that servant community, not just to be comfortable. You see, a lot of us think, well, the goal of life is for me to get as comfortable as possible, and that's not anywhere near God's plan and purpose for us. It's always moving us, challenging us, changing us. He's got a destiny, a calling for each of us. And I think that this is one of the things that we're hoping to do is to help one another fulfill that destiny and calling. One of the reasons I'm so excited about Brandon coming among us, I feel like somehow we're going to bless this young man. But heck, so far it's been the other way around. I think it's just this young man has just been blessing the heck out of me. But I still feel like somehow if we help Brandon find fully his calling and destiny, we've been a pretty good serving community, haven't we? And if you, Joe, find your destiny and calling, if Emily, if each one of us finds our destiny and calling among the serving community, I think this is what God is calling us to be. But Moses is out there in comfort land, not physically comfortable, but nobody's out to get him out there in the desert. He's just out there with his rod, his staff, and he's taking care of sheep, and he happens upon a bush that's burning and doesn't burn out, and a voice comes out of that bush, and he is floored. God speaks to him. God can speak to us in ordinary things. This is what this message is. He can just kind of speak to us in extraordinary ways through ordinary things. How many times has that happened to you? It was just an ordinary circumstance, but God spoke and said, this is something that's supposed to happen in your life. And Moses hears the voice of God. You're to be a deliverer. You're to go back to Egypt. You're to go back to that place you fled. You're to go back there. And I've got a calling in your life. I got a direction for you. I got a destiny for you. And Moses answered, well, what if they do not believe me or listen to me and say, the Lord did not appear to you? Then the Lord said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, oh, this is just this old stick. It's this rod, this staff. That's all it is. And what God says to Moses, throw it on the ground. So Moses threw it on the ground, it became a snake, and he ran from it. And then the Lord said to him, reach out your hand and take it up by the tail. So Moses reached out and took hold of the snake and turned it back into a staff in his hand. This, said the Lord, is so that they may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has appeared to you. This rod, this staff, this stick is become alive. It's full of life. It's a snake, and it's interesting. I don't think you're supposed to. Anybody handle snakes around here? Any snake people? Good. I just was hoping we wouldn't have any of those kind of people around us, but I don't think you're supposed to grab them by the tail. This is what I have this bad feeling. You grab a snake by the tail, and it can come back and bite you. And this is exactly what God's saying to him: grab the snake by the tail, because I've got that snake under control. What you think is just a stick is full of life. It's powerful. And I want you to grab hold of it, because I've got plans for you. I've got something in store for you beyond your understanding. Take the staff, and he says, in your hand, so you can perform signs with it. There's something powerful going on with this snake, with this staff. And so Moses goes to Pharaoh and wants to tell Pharaoh to let his people go. And so Moses and Aaron went to Pharaoh and did just as the Lord commanded. And Aaron threw the staff down in front of Pharaoh and his officials. It became a snake. Yet Pharaoh's heart became hard and he would not listen. All he saw was a magic trick. And so then the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, take your staff and stretch out your hand over the waters of Egypt, over the streams and canals, and over the ponds and over the reservoirs, and they will turn to blood. And Moses and Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded, and he raised the staff in the presence to Pharaoh and his officials and struck the water of the Nile, and all the water was changed into blood. Blood was everywhere in Egypt. But Pharaoh's heart became hard, and he would not listen to Moses and Aaron. He saw a magic trick. And then there was frogs. And the Lord said to Moses, tell Aaron, stretch out your hand with your staff over the streams and canals and ponds and make frogs come up from the land. And so Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt. The frogs came up and covered the land. But when Pharaoh saw that there was relief, he hardened his heart. He just couldn't see the hand of God. And finally it says that the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand toward the sky so that hail will fall all over Egypt on people and animals and everything growing in the fields of Egypt. And when Moses stretched out his staff toward the sky, the Lord sent thunder and hail, and lightning flashed down to the ground. So the Lord rained hail in the land of Egypt, and hail fell, and lightning flashed back and forth. It was the worst storm in all the land of Egypt since it had become a nation. When Pharaoh saw that the rain and hail had stopped, he sinned again, and he and his officials hardened their heart. And so finally, there's a release when the oldest son is struck down, and Pharaoh says, get out of here. But then he changes his mind. And when Moses and the children of Israel are right before the Red Sea, and the army of Egypt is right behind, the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the waters so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. Egyptians will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through the chariots and his horsemen. And so you say, oh gosh, every time that stick became some powerful force in which God spoke to people and things, and God was doing great things in the midst, you'd think that everybody would just say, gosh, we're seeing something powerful going on here. But when there was no water to drink, the people began complaining. The whole Israelite community set out from the desert of Sin, traveling from the place as the Lord commanded, and they camped at Rephidim, and there was no water for the people to drink. So they quarreled with Moses and said, give us water to drink. Then Moses cried out to the Lord, what am I to do with these people? They're almost ready to stone him. And so what Moses did, it says, the Lord answered Moses, go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, take in your hand the staff with which you struck the Nile, with which you separated the Red Sea. Take that same staff that turned into a snake. Take that staff that made frogs come up and hail come down, and go. And I will stand before you by the rock at Horeb, strike the rock, and water will come out of it for people to drink. I'm wondering whether God wants us to have a staff right now, a rod, a symbol of his authority and his power. And I'm wondering whether that's supposed to be his word, the Bible. Powerful force in your life, isn't it, Jim? Jim Young. I'm going to grab this book. Jim keeps on saying, without this book, my life would not be the same. I think So many of us here would say the same thing. It's at those times when the thorn has stuck in pretty deeply that we turn to this book, and somehow it becomes a symbol, a power of authority. It's just words for many people. It's a closed book for many people. It's never referred to. It's never turned to. Last night, Ann and I spent a little time looking into the Word before we went to bed. Let me tell you something. It's a pretty comforting place to go. Charlie called him last night, and he said, Tom, you might be getting up at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and if you do, go ahead and get up and let the Lord speak to you. And pretty good advice, Charlie. But the Lord, I believe, wants to speak to us through His Word. Because He has a lot of things to say there that really help pull thorns out of our side. It just helps us get a better handle. So much of what I'm dealing with right now is to try to get a different perspective on the way life is. It's hard to see it just right. And Anne, this morning, she said, your dad... Your dad's with your mom now. And, he's at a place where never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat upon them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. He's going to have the staff in his hand. And he will lead them to springs of living water. And God will do what? He will wipe away every tear from their eyes.